Welcome to the Business of Us, where we explore the intersection of business, relationships, and family life. This season, we're focusing on the concept of the three mountains of partnership, purpose, and passion, which are the three big challenges that all couples face through their relationship. Whether you're scaling your first mountain or learning how to navigate life after the summit, these episodes will give you stories, tools, and inspiration for the journey. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Jamie Bourne. Jamie is a licensed therapist who works globally with EO and YPO members, entrepreneurs, and their families to help them navigate the unique pressures and challenges that come with a high-performance business and a high-stakes relationship. She's a sought-after speaker, retreat leader, and workshop facilitator, and she's deeply passionate about helping entrepreneurs and their families to navigate the intersection of mental, relational, and family wellness.
Thanks, Cameron. It's also my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Cameron Madill, who founded a multi-million-dollar company that he sold to his team in 2019, which led him to realize his true passion is helping people build strong relationships. He's conducted original research with over 600 entrepreneurs and their spouses to understand how thriving relationships drive both personal well-being and sustainable success. You can read his work at relationshipscienceguy.com. And today he runs the Happy Couples Project, which is focused on experiential date nights and fun workshops. Please keep in mind our podcast is for information only and is not therapy. If you need professional support, we recommend visiting psychologytoday.com. So as Cameron mentioned, this season 2 of the Business of Us, we're really exploring the three mountains, which is a framework for entrepreneurial couples and families and the journeys that they face both in business and relationally. And so last quarter, we focused in on Mountain 1, which is the how, making it work when life and business feels overwhelming. Mountain 2 is the what, which is recalibrating after success and asking those questions of what's next. And then Mountain 3 is who, which is rediscovering identity, intimacy, and vision for the future. So today we are going to be focusing in more on Mountain 2. And our big question is what happens when success isn't the finish line, but the starting point of a whole new set of mental and relational challenges. And I'm super excited to have Tom Bronson here today. I think Tom is the perfect candidate as an expert to help walk us through Mountain 2. So Tom has founded, built, and sold more than 100 companies, including Granberry Solutions, which grew to serve over 9,000 customers worldwide and earned a spot on the Inc. 5000 and Tech Titan's fastest growing list. Currently, Tom serves as the president of Mastery Partners, which helps entrepreneurs maximize business value and achieve their dream exits. He is a sought-after speaker and the author of the Maximize Business Value book series, including his newest release, Efficiency Amplified. So Tom brings a wealth of experience and a huge heart for helping business owners build companies with purpose and legacy. So super excited to have you join us today, Tom.
I am so happy to be here, but I'm really disappointed that you're not going to. This isn't a therapy session for me. That's the only reason I agreed for this. And here
Right?
you're giving a disclaimer that it's not for therapy. I thought I came for therapy.
Well, that's just the audience, Tom. I think you know I'm kidding. This speech. We have to be very careful. It's not therapy. The fun police get really grumpy if we do that.
They do get really grumpy. And here's the thing. You're such an expert in this, Tom. I like to have you come and speak about this. I think you have a ton of experience working, not just lived experience, but also working with other entrepreneurs. And so you've worked with countless entrepreneurs who've achieved major goals and exited their business. And so I'd love to hear what you've seen both personally, but also working with other people around the impact that success has, not just on them as individuals, but their relationships.
So let me back up to my beginning experience with couples working together. The first time that I got to observe that was growing up. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My parents worked together for many, many years, and it gave me an opportunity to see how unhealthy a relationship can become when the relationship becomes the business. Now, to make matters worse, we had several of our family members working in the business too. I was included in that. My brother was included in that. And it got to the point where being away from the business, we couldn't ever get away from the business. Holidays, meals, family get-togethers, business always came up. And to me, that is probably the primary reason that when I found my bride, fell in love, and we got married 35 years ago, I said, we will never work together, because my parents couldn't figure out how to separate work and relationship. My parents are gone, unfortunately, both of them. My dad died when he was younger than I am. My mom passed about 10 or 12 years ago. So I talk about them lovingly, but I want it to be a lesson for other people, right? That when you work together in business, the business relationship can't be the basis for your relationship. First and foremost, you have to have a strong relationship outside of the business. And so I think the thing that surprises me most, because I've worked with a lot of couples who have exited their business, is I think the way you worded the question, it's how they define their success. And I've always said that success is really more of a journey than it is a destination. How do you really define the success? Is it the actual exit? That you got what you wanted, that you're able to do the things, that you can afford to live your life? And many times couples are misaligned on what that looks like. In fact, as I commonly say, because I'm even working with couples now, so I will protect them. But what I commonly say when we're in conversations and I'm coaching them on their business, or we're preparing their business for transition, or we're taking their business to market, which is what we do in our North Star group, I commonly interrupt and go, marriage counseling costs you extra. You're not paying me enough for the marriage counseling. So you guys need to agree on what it is that outside of this, but I'm just stating the facts, and let's move forward, and so don't ask me to counsel your marriage. So I think the thing though that strikes me the most is that misalignment. Many times couples don't have the same goal, and I don't define goal as success. Now, goal is a marker in success, right? Achieving some goal. But if they don't agree on what the goal is, then it's really hard to make that exit. Does all that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the relational patterns that you see for people who tend to be aligned versus misaligned?
Communication. I can tell in a first conversation with couple business owners if they are communicating inside and outside of the business. Now, I have just enough psychology in my background to make me dangerous. I think I have 12 credit hours in college, right? And so I got to know all the big names, and that was about it. But you can tell by the way they talk to each other, by the way they interact, by the way their body language. I can tell if they're aligned or misaligned pretty quickly. And part of what we try to do is take the emotion out of it. A transition is always going to be emotional. And even for our most logical clients, the what is that, left brain like engineer, is that right? So left brain engineer, right brain creative, something like that. I always get those mixed up. I think logically. I don't think about this. I'll give you an example. We had a client that his business sold probably around the middle of January this year, and we were just very methodically going through the process, and everything was staying on track. And about 2 weeks before the transaction, he called me and said, I just want to talk for a minute. I said, what's going on? And he said, I really didn't realize how emotional this was going to be. Well, it is. I warned you about that, right? We talked about it. And I said, don't ever make decisions in emotion. And so there was nothing going on that was going to derail the deal. But people, when they get emotional, tend not to think as rationally as they should when they're non-emotional, when they're not threatened, when they're not. And so we try to help them get the emotion out of it. And I tell them, hey, you have to treat it just like every CEO should treat any piece of information. Like Master Shifu said in Kung Fu Panda, there is no good or bad news. There's only news, right? And then, of course, I think he proceeded to say that Tai Lung had escaped the prison. Oh, that is indeed bad news, right? So there is no such thing as good or bad news. When you're running a business, information is information. There is positive information and negative information, but your job running a business is to take all of that non-emotionally and make business decisions that you can make clear-headed. Every business decision that I've made with a hothead or being emotional, without fail, has turned out to be a bad decision. And that runs the same for couple business owners, right? So we tell them right up front when we start working with them, this is going to get emotional, and we'll start seeing behaviors from you that are telling us where the stress is. We've got a deal that's closing very soon, husband and wife. The husband's literally spent 45 years in this business, and he's starting to feel the pressure of, oh man, what comes next, right? And so they are achieving the financial goal that they had, but financial is only one leg of a stool of kind of that whole success path for business owners. And so, to go back full circle on your question, it's really the thing that helps mitigate that is open and honest communication. When couples, just like business partners, I've got two other business partners in one of my businesses, North Star, and we agreed from the beginning, we're going to disagree on things, but let's disagree agreeably, and let's state our positions, and 2 out of 3 wins, right? And so and you win some, you lose some, as long as you make your argument, and everybody leaves the room with a united front, right? That, okay, this is the decision that we made. Well, same thing in couples, right? And if there is not that open, honest communication and the ability to disagree amicably, then there's going to be challenges, right? And so now the other side of it is sometimes, and I don't know if I'm stepping on some future question here or not, but sometimes one of I'll call them partners, right? Business partners is more domineering, and it's sort of overpowers the other one. Well, that can cause a lot of resentment, right? And so it's just making sure that there's good, honest, open communication. That hurt my feelings. Why don't you let me participate in this conversation? And it's just good. It's really difficult to change somebody's their EQ, their emotional intelligence. But when it comes to this, if there's emotion, bad decisions are going to be made. That's just plain and simple. And there will start to be a dividing line, which could be the beginning of what otherwise might have looked like a healthy relationship that suddenly starts falling apart.
Tom, I'm curious, you brought emotions up quite a bit. So I remember when I sold my company, it was late 2019, and I did an employee ownership sale. So it was literally 100% my choice. There was yes, there was another buyer, but it was the internal team. They were very friendly. And I still remember sitting in an airport in like December, and I got some of the final paperwork, and I had this reaction. I was just like, they're trying to steal my company. It was like the most random thing. I was like, these bastards are trying to steal my company. And I mean, literally my idea, just insane. So I sort of view that as an early precursor to some of these identity shifts of letting go of me as CEO, me as founder, me as owner. So I'm curious, like what do you see as far as the identity shifts that happen when people go through these exits, good and bad, and maybe how can they prepare for them, or what can they know about them?
That's a great question. And by the way, I would have probably predicted that, right? That there was possibly the only person on the planet that doesn't get emotional about transitions at this point is me, because I've done so many of them, and I can't wait, right? It's okay. I'm finally clear of this. Here is the challenge, I think, that is the root cause of the problem that you're identifying in that question. And it is, for many business owners, couples included, the business is their identity. They have no identity outside of that business. And the longer they've been in business, the more likely that identity has taken strong root. And so one of the things we start with our clients is, okay, how much time do you spend in the business, right? How dependent is this business on you? If something happens to you and you don't even make it home tonight, what happens to this business tomorrow, right? And a lot of business owners will say, they will admit that that would be a serious problem, that there are things that people don't know that they need to know, that that the business owners, one of the other is, 100% responsible for operations. The other one is 100% responsible for relationships with clients. And guess what? It's not, I mean, I don't live my life this way, but I never get on an airplane with my second in command. And many times business owners are number one and number two, right, on that plane. They get on planes together all the time. And that can destroy a business, and it can destroy that business's ability then to pay that owner off. All right. So that's one side, but if you can't separate your identity from the business, if everybody thinks of themselves that way, then you've got a real problem, and you've got to spend time to think about what really brings value in my life. What are the things that keep me going every morning, right? A business owner, and I don't care if they really are distanced from it, if they are wrapped up in their business, that's one thing, but if they're really distanced, they're going to get emotional when the time comes. But if they don't have a plan for what's next, that is a path to disaster.
Tom, can I jump in on this? I want to ask you a question about that. So I get that, and I'm actually thinking of this was a tough thing. Like in my extended family, I guess I'll try to leave it a little anonymous. There was one couple that was very successful. They built a really good company. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would guess 10 million plus on their exit that they took home because they lived a really comfortable life. But it turned out that basically one of them, after selling the business, their life dream existed somewhere in Middle America, and the other person's life dream existed somewhere in Europe. Like they had made the business so central to their life that they hadn't thought about what comes next, or maybe they avoided it.
Right.
And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how do you start to dig into that what's next chapter, especially if you're kind of already at that exit point, right?
I don't think it'll come as any surprise, but I think the answer is going to be similar to the last question. It's that communication. They need to be talking about what it is that we want to do. I'll give you a great example. Couple with a very sizable opportunity. I mean, approaching 9 figures, right? I mean, big exit. And they were getting close to that transaction time. I mean, within a week. And the husband says, just out of the blue, man, I can't wait until we close this. We're going to buy the biggest boat and we are going to sail around the world.
Yeah.
And the wife looked at him and said, what are you talking about? This is the first time you've mentioned this to me. What are you talking about? She says, I'm not sailing around the world. We're here with our grandchildren, and I'm looking forward to spending time with our grandchildren. How can I do that if I'm sailing around the world for a year? Well, at the end of the day, that derailed that deal. It fell apart because the owner was now like, well, I've had in my mind what I'm doing when I sell this, and I'm going to spend a year and just go and see everything. And the wife was like, no, we're not. We're going to spend more time with our grandkids. Well, ultimately, we brought in a psychologist to help out with them, and ultimately, she crafted a way to make it a win-win for each of them. That he would get to buy his boat and set sail, and at set times, every month, the wife was going to bring one of their grandchildren and fly and meet them, and they would sail to the next place and then fly back home. And so they were able to work out. But the whole point is, how in the world do you get that close to a transaction and don't know what each other is thinking about what the future is. That's just shocking to me. But it's shocking, but it's not shocking. It's not surprising. People don't talk. You know, I was very fortunate when Karen and I got married. My parents went through a rough time during their marriage, and they found a couple that were marriage counselors. So they did couples therapy. They were both in it. We were in it. I mean, not my parents, but it was just the couple therapists and us. And I will never forget what the analogy that they used with us. They said, you got to communicate. You got to talk about things. Said, here's communication is the thermostat in your relationship. If things get too hot, what do? You go to the thermostat and adjust it. If things get too cold, what do? You go to the thermostat and adjust it. And so you have to think of communication as that thermostat in your marriage. And more importantly, deal with it while you still have passion, because if suddenly this causes a big rift, I've seen couples, fortunately not my clients, but I've seen couples who have sold their business, lost their identity, wound up getting divorced and going different ways. And that's horrible. You've spent your life building this business and so that you could build something together. You never talked about it, and now suddenly it's gone and you decide you don't like each other. It's the same thing that happens when kids grow up, right? That what happens when you're empty nesters? Karen and I are such fantastic empty nesters. We couldn't wait. When our daughter was a senior in high school, we asked her if she wanted to go to boarding school because we were ready to be empty nesters. We wanted to get back to the life that we had before we had kids. And we joke about that a lot, but we love being alone and doing things and having fun together. But again, we're not tied together in the business, but that's not always the case. And so this is a major life-changing thing. You have to give thought and communicate about what's coming next down the pipe, especially if your partners in business together. We had a client that we represented, and it's been many years ago, that sold their business because he was so ready to be done and she wasn't. But they worked really well together in the business, but that opposite goal, that opposite thought process was starting to drive a wedge into their marriage. And they spoke with us openly about this, right? And so it got to the point where she was like, fine, you know what? To make him happy and so we can get back to being married again, we'll do this. Well, ultimately, they were able to find a transaction that she could continue on. And she continued on for several years working for the buyer, running a much bigger organization because she's really talented. And then he got to go off and play and do what he wanted to do, right? And manage some of their other businesses and things like that. But start with the goal, right? Hey, this is what I'm thinking. Now, my wife and I have this clear understanding. I'm a never gonna, that retire. As long as I can bring value, as long as I have a voice, as long as I can help people, as long as it brings value, I want to continue to do so. She has felt much the same way, but in recent years has said, probably in 3 or 4 years, I'm ready to pack it in and go do some other things. And like what? Does that mean that I need to pack it in and go do some other things? No. I want, you've written 3 books. I want to write a book. I want to do this. I want to do that. And which is really cool because it gives me the ability to keep doing what I'm doing and her the freedom to go do what she wants to do. But the whole point is we talk about it. We think about those things. If her thought of retirement is both of us going to retire, well, that would be a problem, right? And for couples that work together, especially so.
I think some of what you've been describing is that this concept that achieving everything creates different stresses or distance in relationships in a somewhat predictable way, right? And this sort of misalignment around the concept of what is enough and how that can be different for one partner versus another partner. And so the overarching strategy here really being around solid communication. I'm curious though, and I guess one more thing that I would add to that, I love the context of your personal story and what you experienced growing up, because it certainly sounds like it had a major impact on how you structured things for yourself and then in how you're working with people. I'm curious though, for couples who have maybe reached their goals and they've realized that this hasn't actually delivered the fulfillment that they were expecting, what kind of practical advice would you give them?
Well, that they need to step back and really define what brings their life meaning. What gets them up in the morning? What are they really jazzed about? If it's just making more money, well, if you sell the business, you aren't going to be going out making more money, right? And so, and a lot of times people focus on purely the financial target, right? And by the way, it's worth saying here because couples are no different than individual business owners. Most business owners don't sit with a financial advisor and define what that plan needs to be. And that is a tragic mistake. And it's because most business owners, whether they're couples or not, think that, well, no financial advisor would touch me with a 10-foot pole because 90% of my net worth is tied up in this business. All they want to do is manage my assets. Well, of course they want to manage your assets, but they also are the ones who can evaluate your life and force you into those conversations about what does come next. How much do I need? Or am I going to travel? Am I going to need golf membership? Am I going to move? So that they can determine what your wealth gap is, right? And so we know how much you have. Here's how much you need in order to live your lifestyle for the rest of your life. Well, couples are just like that. One might say, oh gosh, we need 3 million to live for the rest of our lives. And the other one going, what are you talking about? I mean, 20 million. Why do we need 20 million? Well, because I want to buy a yacht, right? Well, okay, it's forcing you into those conversations. We do like to tell our clients, we're going to force you into some potentially uncomfortable conversations that you've never thought about because you need to get clear or you're setting yourself up for failure. Most people, forget about business owners or married, not married, whatever. Most people don't really have a clear plan for what's next after they retire, after they sell a business, and I would argue that you just really need to start thinking about if this is the only thing that brings meaning to my life, and I'm going to sell it and set myself up with enough money, because that was one of my goals. I needed the money. Well, now that I have the money, what brings me meaning every day? And if I can get even more personal on my story, I tell this story in the last chapter of my very first book. When my dad ultimately sold his business, the business that he and mom owned, they had enough money to live a long and fruitful life doing whatever they wanted to do, but they didn't have a strategy. And very soon after they sold the business, my dad started getting depressed because he felt like he let the employees down. He felt like he no longer had any friends. He felt like he was not seeing people that he always associated with. Nobody was calling him. And he just kept sinking deeper and deeper into this horrific depression. Now, he had been battling cancer for a number of years, but very successfully because the type of cancer that he had was very treatable. But we started to watch his health decline because of his mental health. And so I tried like hell to dig him out, to go, hey, Dad, I'm going to start this project. I'm living in Chicago now. I'm going to buy 3 houses on our street that need work. Why don't you move up here and be the GC and redo this? And I couldn't get him out of his head. I watched him waste away, and we buried him 3 years after he sold the business. He sold it when he was 55, and we buried him 3 years later. And I knew instantly it was because he had not thought about what was next, and he felt like the business was his value. None of the things that he thought was true. The people that worked for him went on and had greater opportunities with the company that bought him. The friends that he had in the business, he never called them either, right? And everybody, when he passed, the place that we chose to have the funeral was pretty large, and it was overflowing with people. And so it even gets me choked up thinking about this now. But it's all because he didn't think about what was next. And I was too young and stupid to even have this kind of a conversation with him. So I started to realize that. Now it's interesting because I wrote about that in my first book. And a couple of years ago, and that book's been out since 2019. A couple of years ago, my brother called me and we were talking about Dad. And he said, and he's been gone, by the way, for 27 years upcoming. And he said, Tom, I think Dad died because he didn't have purpose. And I went, really, Mike? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, you know what that tells me? Tells me you didn't read my book, because that's exactly what I said. And so I said that years ago. And so I'm on a mission. Look, here at Mastery Partners, North Star Mergers and Acquisitions and Business Transition Summit, we're all about educating and elevating businesses and bringing them up and helping them transition. But I am on a mission that story never has to be told by another son or daughter forever for any business owner. And so getting really clear on what's next for you and what brings value to your life that's not your business, that is so important. There are ways to be able to do that. Step back, delegate stuff that you don't think is delegatable, but step back from the business and take a month off without calling in. See how that feels. Test drive what retirement might look like. Go and volunteer for a month. If you're into doing mission trips, don't do a weekend mission trip. Go somewhere for a month out in the place that there is no cell coverage and try that on. You might find out that you come back with even greater meaning than you had when you left, right? And now your passion changes to something else. I love it when a business owner, because I ask them right in that first interview, what's next for you? What are you going to do? And they go, oh, I can't wait. I actually started this passion project over here, and I've got this thing I'm going to be doing with my church. And I've got, and they are going on and on and on about, and they're energized about what's coming next. But the ones that go, well, I suppose I'll play golf a lot more. Okay, you can't play golf ever. I know exactly one business owner that I've ever known that actually does play golf every day, and it brings him meeting. But he and his wife both play together. So, okay, all right. Well, you're the one guy that's the exception to the rule. But everybody else, you need to find something that brings meaning, and whether that's starting a foundation, doing good for others, maybe even starting another business. I mean, that's always been my plan. Eventually, these 3 businesses that I own now, just like all the other businesses I've owned, I will sell them. And guess what? I'll probably go do it again, because that's fun. That's what brings me meaning, bringing value to others. So I probably danced all around your question and didn't actually answer.
No, that was a very poignant answer. I really appreciate you connecting it to why this stuff really matters. Jamie shared a bit about her story as well. How, I think you summarized it beautifully, that, success is a process. It's not a moment.
Yeah, it's a journey. Think of it as a journey, celebrate the small successes, That, by the way, is another challenge that we have just in our society, I think. And it manifests with business owner couples as well. Just as we're starting to approach a goal, before we get there and grab that top rung, we move the goal, because we're about to get there, and let's move the goal. And we never take the time to celebrate the success. And so I wish more people would stop and celebrate. Or now, if you're in one of my businesses, we're big fans of the 10x is easier than 2x mentality, meaning let's 10x our business. And by the way, we almost never reach the 10x goal. However, we celebrate because we don't measure against the goal. We measure against the distance that we've come, right, from the beginning. It's Dan Sullivan introduced this concept in a short book called The Gap and the Gain, and then Ben Hardy wrote it. We live too much in the gap. Let's say that here is where you are, and here is where your goal is, and you only reach this far. Well, we live up here in this gap that we didn't achieve the goal, when we should live in the gain of goodness, look how far we've come. I think business owner couples should think about that as well. You know, if you don't reach a certain goal, but regardless, when you reach the end, celebrate the wins. Always celebrate the wins.
So, Tom, I can now see, and I've heard this, that you are like a very, if I may say, loquacious individual. You have this like depth and breadth of knowledge. No, it's wonderful. It's like, and I can tell we're getting pieces of your books and your life story and all your client work. I want to go in a totally different direction. I want to do some rapid fire questions, like quick hitting. Tom, what is one unusual fact that people may not know about you?
I used to have hair halfway down my back. And if somebody's watching this podcast on video, you'll understand that I am follically challenged these days. But literally, and the fun part was that this would have been in the 80s, and I grew hair, you know, all the way down my back. And then about a month before my sister got married, I got it permed. And so big bushy, you know, and
We need photos, Tom. We need photos for the episode artwork.
Yeah.
We're only going to
Yes.
use photos, only accepting from the 80s.
For the
Yeah.
thumbnail.
All right, I want to go next. What's the best meal you ever had?
oh, the best meal I ever had. Oh God, there are so many to choose from on this, because we do like to have great meals. But I would have to say the best meal that we ever had was at the French Laundry in California, Thomas Keller's
Sonoma, yeah.
restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, when Anthony Bourdain went there, because he said, Thomas Keller calls this the best restaurant in America, prove it. And then he left there going, it is the best restaurant in America. And so that was the best. But there is a long list of fantastic meals at our
Yep.
background.
We'll take French Laundry. That's legit. What Tom is, we always like to talk about, you know, the good things, celebrate the wins, live in the game. Let's talk about the gap. What's one vacation you'll never repeat? You'll never go back.
That is really difficult, because if you don't know any of this about me, but as we've told our kids, we are spending their inheritance creating amazing memories, right? I mean, we take the most fantastic vacations, including renting a castle in Austria, and
Okay.
living like royalty. I mean,
You're really messing this question up, Tom. We're only going negative here. I don't want any positivity out of
but
you.
the one that I will never do again is Airbnb, because I had a really bad experience in an Airbnb in Miami, Florida. It was nasty, dirty, and we'll never do that again.
There you go. Usually there's like bed bugs or something involved. And then Tom, we actually talked a little bit about sports beforehand. I'm not going to heckle you. You made me promise to not mention two team names. What is your favorite sports team?
The Washington Redskins, no doubt.
Because that's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, I was born in DC. Although, yes, I live in Dallas now. There's nothing in the DNA of somebody who grew up in Washington that could be a Cowboys fan. It's funny because I've lived around America. When I was in Charlotte, I was a Panthers fan. In Jacksonville, Florida, I became a Jaguars fan. I even rooted for the Bears when I lived in Chicago. But now that I live in Dallas, I'm a Redskins fan again.
All right, let's do our final take. Tom, I'm curious, is there anything you didn't get to that you wanted to share, or anything you especially want to reiterate for our audience as they're thinking about this second mountain and how to navigate it?
No, I just think sit back, take a day, walk away, and sit down with a blank piece of paper, or better yet, a journal, and start writing down what's next. What's next? Start thinking about that, and if possible, do it with your spouse. I mean, especially if you're married in business together, go do it together. Maybe take a half a day for each of you to go sit down and write. And it's really hard for men to do this, right? I mean, it shouldn't be,
Yeah.
but I promise the words will start flowing, as you start thinking about it, and then come together and harmonize that. I mean, what a beautiful couples retreat that would be, is to think about what's next for us. Karen and I do that a lot, because she works at a university that's 6 hours from here. So when she drives, sometimes I go with her and we spend time talking about this stuff and thinking about it, because it really is kind of fun to dream about the future and to be intentional about what it is.
Love that. The power of a blank page. All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our big question was, what happens when success isn't the finish line, but it's just the starting point? I think Tom did a beautiful job of answering that. I know for me, I would actually, we used to always call it enjoy the journey in my old company, but another version of not thinking of success as an outcome, but a process that we're a part of. I'd invite everyone listening just to think and reflect on where you are right now. Which one of these three mountains, partnership, purpose, or passion, are you on? And then please subscribe, share with someone who you think might be climbing their own mountain right now. Next episode, we will be continuing with Mountain 2. All right, The Business of Us is brought to you by Jamie and myself. Music is from our friends at Marmoset, and the theme song is Kenton by Dr. Crosby. And until the next time, we wish you all the best of luck in making your relationship both intentional and remarkable.